Make my presence known, D.
That's right.
Hard all over this place.
Ty asked before if we're going to peak. I said, if we are, we're going to do it in this room.
You can do it, Dennis Reynolds. You're a winner.
Ooh, I like that. All right, man.
There we go, man. We got this going right now.
Yeah, we're back into it with the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Quinn, with my good friend Dom DiTolla. And you know what? This episode, let's just kick right into it. This guy is so associated with basketball for me that I love that we're doing it.
Yeah.
Pistol Pete Maravich.
Hell yes, Pistol Pete Maravich. You know that line in Eastbound and Down where Kenny Powers has basically cornrows in his hair and everyone's questioning him and he's like, I transcend race, hombre.
Yep.
That's Pete Maravich. He transcends race. He's the white guy on the Harlem Globetrotters just kicking the shit out of everybody.
Yeah, that's what everybody said was, especially in this era where this was kind of a saying, was that he had a black soul, if you will, in his white body, which I always thought when people were saying it, you're just like,
oh, yeah.
You say that now, people would just be like, what are you saying?
But then you watch him play basketball and you're like, Jason Williams might have been white chocolate, but this guy is beyond white chocolate.
Yeah, he was, this is what people were saying, was he was so inventive with this that he was really stepping out like a Harlem Globetrotter where people were like, whoa, that's like a little bit too flashy.
He essentially was playing basketball 50 years ahead of his time.
Yes.
And that's what made it so entertaining to watch and hear about how his teammates described him. And my God, just a fantastic figure that we lost too early.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a sad run. And this is something that I thought was so interesting that because through this research I saw, and we'll get into it, his dad had this dream that he would be this unbelievable basketball player. And he said that this dream ended up turning really into a nightmare because of the way his career went.
And the expectations and all.
I'll tell you what, we're going to get right into it.
Let's get right into it.
Right
Born
here.
June 12th, 1947 in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. And let me say something about this, because as a Steelers fan, I actually understand this, is Aliquippa is not a basketball town. Aliquippa is a hard-nosed football town. And when I say that, I mean you have had some of the NFL's best players come out of Aliquippa. And I'm talking like legit dudes like Mike Ditka, Darrelle Revis, Ty Law. Even Sean Gilbert came from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. Like the Quips is their high school nickname. I mean, like, it is a football town. But that didn't matter to Mr. Press Maravich, Pete Maravich's dad.
Well, I thought that was so interesting. And we have to start Pete's story with Press, who was a professional basketball player. He was a Serbian immigrant.
Yeah, and which is weird because he almost molded Pete in a way like another Serbian gentleman named Marv Marinovic for Todd Marinovic. Yeah. I don't know if it's a Serbian thing. I don't know if it's a 1389 weird type of like, we must break you type of deal. But yeah, no, it's crazy because his dad played basketball and he was like, I have a son, I can create anything.
Well, that was the thing, was he saw that there was no future for him in playing, and he quickly went into coaching and coaching high school in Aliquippa, which I thought was so interesting because he actually coached Mike Ditka as a basketball player, and he said he was just like, when Press wanted you to run, you ran all day.
Exactly.
But what Press said was when he was getting Pistol Pete interested into the game, he did something that was so interesting, was he actually would go out and play in front of him and tell him that he can't play, that it's for older people. And I thought that was so great because he literally, before he ever played, he got this like hunger started going into him like, no, I could play that.
Well, and he wants to be like his dad because his dad was a great basketball mind, great basketball coach, great basketball player. And it's like, I just want to spend time with my dad. And if he's always in the gym, that's the best thing ever. And his dad, from what I had researched, was basically like, basketball is my way out of this place.
Yes.
Basketball is ensuring I don't work in a steel mill.
That's literally what he was doing pre-basketball. Essentially, like, that's what everybody in their neighborhood was doing. And Press had this one thing that he was like, basketball could get us out of essentially poverty.
Exactly. And I mean, when you look at the city of Pittsburgh and all the surrounding areas, it's a bunch of Southern and Eastern European immigrants, basically forced to work in steel mills, but it's another avenue.
Yep.
And Pete wants to be with his dad. Pete wants to compete. Pete wants to have a good time playing sports. And I find it absolutely fascinating.
Well, I think that he put so much time from when he was essentially like 6, 7, 8 to when he's then in the 8th grade that I just feel like kids weren't doing that, putting that much time in the basketball court, because we see that he was essentially competing varsity high school basketball when he was in the 8th grade.
Yeah, no, and I mean, his dad had him playing with the varsity when he was 13 years old.
And that's where he got his little nickname.
Yeah, Pistol Pete.
Yeah, because he would shoot from his hip, because he said he was so weak he couldn't essentially pull it up and shoot. He had to like have a whole motion, and it looked like he was pulling a gun from his hip,
firing it out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, while he was a definitely tall dude, even for his era, for his shooting guard, I mean, even now 6'5" is still a substantial height.
Yeah.
He's only 197 pounds listed. He's probably 20 pounds less than that.
Oh yeah, and I don't think this was because he was in 8th grade. I don't think he had hit his height spurt yet. So like, yeah, he was like a little guy. When you see the picture, because they have the pictures, because I guess he was very, how do you put this, intimidated by these high school players that he was forced to undress in front of, and they were making fun of him essentially the whole time, and because he was the coach's son, and I mean, that whole thing.
But he's your money player, so you're just like, hey, look at that 2-inch cock. Fuck it.
Exactly.
He's scoring 30 a night.
Yes, but that's what he had to deal with, was this kind of like, I'm so much smaller, but I'm going to prove it on the court.
And that was the other thing. I mean, as his dad rose up in the coaching ranks, obviously they moved from Western PA, West Virginia, down to South Carolina, where his dad was the head coach at Clemson. He went to Daniel High School there and obviously played with the varsity while he was like a 7th, 8th grade type of player. He's there, everyone's looking and laughing at him, and then after 2 minutes of being on the court, they're like, oh, holy shit.
Yeah, because he was looked at as almost like, oh, is this a charity case? Because literally what he said was they wouldn't guard him the first couple of minutes. He would get the ball, and they would be like, this realization like, oh, this isn't like some sick kid.
No, he's a
there.
Fucking silent assassin.
Exactly. And I want to bring this up. His shooting for this era, because we talk about it, the tall man was...
It's all center-based.
It's all center-based. And then Pete's like, I could shoot the shit out of this ball from anywhere.
Yeah, he's just like, give me the ball, I'm open.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. He while he's in South Carolina, he goes to Daniel High School for his first 2 years. Absolute star. His dad's head coach at Clemson, obviously. And people are starting to notice Pete. People are really starting to be like, okay, maybe this sickly child is the next greatest NBA player.
Well, and then I think it's in his junior year that his dad gets the job at NC State.
He does, yeah, because his dad was basically known as a fixer.
Yes.
In, college sports, where he might not lead your team to a title, but he will turn things around to such an extent where it'll be like, oh, thank God we had him for like 5 years because everything is back on track.
And this is when Pete hits his first like growth spurt. So he's like 6'3" at this point. And I know there was this story about him running into his old coach, and he was just like, hey, coach. And the coach was like, who the hell is this kid?
Yeah, right.
And he's just like, it's Pete. And he's just like, oh, because at that point he started growing his hair out. And like he kind of starts to resemble the Pete Maravich that we kind of know.
Yeah, he's got the longer hair and everything. He looks like an actual man.
Yes.
Just not among, men.
Yes, exactly. And I bet it's that huge shift from before where he looked like a boy amongst men, and now he looks like an actual man. You're like, who the hell is this?
Yeah, no, and then after his dad gets to NC State, he goes to Broughton High School, and one of the things I found most fascinating is, like, while he pushed his son, it wasn't the Marinovich type thing, is, like, Pete was just obsessed with basketball.
Yes, himself.
Yeah, he was just like, his dad would be like, I'm going to lock you in the gym for a few hours, you figure it out, and he would figure out all these ball handling moves. He would figure out behind the back passes through the legs. I mean, like, legit, when I said Harlem Globetrotters, it is that type of stuff that he was like refining, not like with a team like that or like on the streets, like we talked about Rafer Alston in Queens. It was just him like, I transcend race, hombre.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing my own thing. Like, he was his own individual badass.
Well, somebody said he was getting so much time on the court that he was getting bored and he was trying to entertain himself. And I thought that was pretty accurate for the era.
Because basketball, like, is an awesome game, obviously now, but back in the day, it was very stodgy. It's like, oh, here's an entry pass to your center. He'll have a hook shot, whatever.
Exactly.
Not your guards being like, yeah, I can make assists, but I can deke this other point guard or two guard and find an open shot and just give us money points.
Yeah. No, he is one of these guys that propels the game forward, which why his career is so sad when it's looked back on, because like you said,
and it's not like he had a bad career.
Exactly. It's just like you said, he was 50 years ahead of the game and nobody, I felt like, really took advantage of it.
He seems like one of those players, even though he achieved way more success when he was in the pros, it's like that guy could play in any era. Like Jim Brown as a running back could play in any era. Pete Maravich is your two guard that could play in any era of the NBA based on his skill set.
It's one of those things where like you see these guys who transcend not race on this one, but essentially time. Like Pele could play in any era.
Oh my God.
Maradona could play in any era. And
all
Pete is that
orgies.
guy. Yeah, exactly. But Pete is that guy. So let's talk about him. Do you have any other high school basketball stories?
Really, only the high school is they would play against college players and he'd be
dominate
on the team and just dominate them by himself, which is incredibly crazy to think. But he had to do a post-grad year at, I believe, Edwards Military Institute.
Well, this is what I wanted to talk about, his transition to college, because there's a lot of different stories out there. And I want to hear a couple of stories from you. I'll give a couple of stories, and we'll see which one we believe.
Well, his GPA was not good.
Not good at all. And NC State made it clear that they didn't want somebody that low of GPA, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, which is fine by that same token, because this is a different era of, college basketball.
Yep.
And by that same token, Pete Maravich was put on this earth to do one thing, like Happy Gilmore playing hockey. He was put on this earth to shoot a basketball and do amazing things passing it.
And, well, I want to say this. Press essentially had this one dream of coaching him in college.
Exactly, which honestly lined up because after the first year at Edwards, because, college football sees this a lot. They go to, like, a lot of prep schools for a year, which doesn't count against your eligibility or anything. It's to get your grades up and develop more attractive exactly to colleges around the country. And Pete was honestly looking at going to West Virginia, and because West Virginia, Western PA, it's the same goddamn thing. Let's be honest. But Press ends up getting a job at LSU.
Well, I wanna say this because he's leaving NC State, and it's kind of known that he makes it clear, like, if you bring me, I'm bringing Pete with me.
And everyone's like, oh, you're bringing your son. Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, it's like you said, he had these other offers, but this was before colleges recruited without parents.
Yeah.
So they had to recruit through Press, and Press was essentially telling Pete that nobody wanted him. And he was like, I'm getting this job at LSU, and this is the story that I wanted to bring up, and I kind of wanted to check with you, is Pete said he came home, he said, my dad said, hey, I got this job at LSU, you can sign this contract or you can never come back home.
Oh my God.
And then there was a family friend who said, I heard a different story where Pete and Press were arguing, and Pete just goes, I want a car. And Press just goes, yeah, we'll get you a car. That's fine. Because at this point, and this is what I think is so interesting, is LSU had minus a basketball program.
No, I mean, like, when you look at the SEC of the late 60s, early 70s,
it was all football.
It is entirely a football conference.
Yeah.
It is entirely a football conference. Like, it is a rough sell for any young, talented kid to be like, yeah, I'm going to go to Dixie and, shoot the round ball.
Exactly. And this is what I think starts essentially what his, because I call it a pro career when they're in college because they're essentially pros not getting paid. But he's the best player playing on the worst team.
Oh, yeah. And he
constantly
just goes to the absolute dregs to appease his father, somebody who in high school threatened to shoot him with a 45 if he ever caught him drinking or with ladies. I mean, he kind of had to go, but it was actually important for SEC basketball to actually improve and prove to the rest of the country that, like, okay, we're legitimate. We just don't care about football 90% of the time.
Exactly. It finally gave them some sort of legitimacy where they could finally start recruiting. And I mean, we see the dividends on that. But like we were saying, it was almost preposterous to think that because he was number one, number two recruit out of high school or out of this.
Yeah. And nobody that watched him play in high school was like, oh, yeah, this guy's going to be a failure.
Yes, exactly. So that's why going to LSU was so ridiculous. So let's bring up the point that in this era, freshmen can't play varsity ball.
And we brought it up in Wes Unseld,
Yep.
and we're looking at his statistics and watching what little film I had. I'm like, dear God, you can do better than Wes Unseld? Jesus Christ, on a freshman team?
Oh, it's so good. But something else I thought was so ridiculous was everybody understood that this was the guy. So when he was on the freshman team, people would show up to the freshman game and then leave
just
for the
book
varsity.
It for the varsity. I heard it described as like, no, when Pete was on the freshman team, you'd go to the old gym on campus and be like, oh, this is the place to be.
Yeah.
This is the place to be seen. This is the place to watch fun basketball. This is amazing. And I'm just looking at these stats right now, and like, I know we discussed in our Wes Unseld episode about like pure domination, which Wes did.
Yeah.
I give him 100% credit, NBA Hall of Famer, 50th anniversary, just like Pete Maravich for the NBA. 43.6 points per game, 10.4 rebounds, and almost a 46% field goal percentage. And this isn't an era that I want to bring up. No three-point line, no fucking shot clock to where teams could freeze other teams. He's just firing at will.
I was thinking about this before we came into this episode. I was like, the phrase that we're probably going to repeat is no three-point line and no shot clock, because it is such a ridiculous stat. Because this is the other thing was he was shooting three-pointers back then.
Oh, he was shooting well beyond the arc. He's like Steve Kerr at the Cactus at McHale Center.
And somebody said that just to be like a conservative would be to give him an extra 10 points average a year. That's conservative. And I remember somebody else saying like, yeah, but if there was a three-point line, he would have been launching like 12 threes a game. And that was the thing that press gave him, which was, I think, was unheard of, which was a guard had free reign to essentially shoot as many times as he wanted.
And while he's basically listed as a two guard, he's a combo guard.
He's a combo guard,
he can do everything. And Dale Brown, who was later coach at LSU, he coached Shaq and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, those guys. He was saying, like, if you went back, because he had charted all his shots as an assistant.
Yep.
He was saying that if they had the three-point line, his college scoring career would have been like 57 points a game.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's
when you're scoring over half 100, unfucking real.
Yeah. The only drawback, I'll say this, in the SEC at that point, it was an all-white league, and we know that that's just not the kind of defense you want to see. But saying that, it was still competitive because this was still...
Man, I don't care if you're hitting from the ladies' tees. 57 points a game is 57 points a game, for fuck's sake.
No shot clock. That's the thing that blows my mind, because teams would hold out on him specifically because they knew that he would run up the score, and that was bad for him.
Yeah, and
bad for them.
And in his freshman year, they only lost one game.
Yeah.
They only lost to Tennessee in the final game. But, like, his dad is just salivating just the next season for 3 more years to get Pistol Pete Maravich.
Yeah. So let's talk about his stats, because his stats are what people, they're ridiculous.
Yeah.
3,667 points over his 3 years.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. Like the first year, 67, 68, he has 1,138. 68, 69, he has 1,148. And then the thing that I think is beyond ridiculous is his 69, 70 season, where he has 1,381 points.
Well, and if you factor that in for a points per game average, 67, 68, it's 43.8. 68, 69, 44.2. And then his senior season, where he ends up breaking the scoring record, it's 44.5. And there's some controversy as far as his dad, as far as him going like, Pete needs to take 30 shots a game. It's never been verified, but it's like, well, fuck yeah, he should be taking 30 shots a game. Like,
well, that's what I mean. Was
point line.
This was the era that people thought that shouldn't happen, especially for a guard.
Yeah, especially for a guard because it's so center based. But
which I agree. That's just kind of bullshit. He ends up beating Oscar Robertson for the all-time record of points, and he said something like Oscar talking about Pete was just like, he was such a great player. I don't feel bad about losing this. You know what I mean?
And
there was no shit talking from him.
And he was a team player.
Yes.
And that was the other thing, is he wanted to get everybody involved.
Yeah.
And
oh man,
that's what's lost on everybody. And Dale Brown had a great quote, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can break his record with a 3-point line. You just got to average 15 3-pointers a game."
Yeah.
15
a game to get 45 points.
Making it 15 times.
Yeah.
Like absolutely fucking absurd.
So I want to talk about his passing during these LSU because there's some footage out there. All these games aren't obviously on tape, but there's some footage out there with these passes that he does that essentially fakes out his own teammates.
Yeah, and he's just throwing it to the popcorn guy.
Yeah, well, there's a center or a power forward on his team who's just like, when you're looking at Pete, he's not going to give you the ball. As soon as you turn your head, you better be ready because that thing is coming. And you can see guys literally get nailed in the face with these absolutely beautiful passes.
Oh, yeah, and they have no idea it's coming.
No idea. And that was the thing that I thought, like you were saying, he is like 50 years ahead of his game. If he was playing today, I feel like he would almost be more of a passer and a catch shooter than what we see he is here, which is pretty much just like a playmaker.
He would be Jason Williams on steroids as far as passing, and he would be the equivalent of Steph Curry as far as shooting.
But also 6'5".
Hey everybody, just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs. Yeah, also 6'5",
yeah,
which is just crazy, and he's actually the third of 4 in NCAA history to win the scoring title.
Yep.
But also win the scoring title in the NBA. Steph Curry was the 4th of 4.
Yeah.
So it's just unreal. They turned a program, I think they were 3-20 in his sophomore year, and they finished 4th in the NIT in his senior year, which is just an absolute crazy type of thing. And the saddest part is as far as his parents were concerned, particularly his mom, he was a tortured soul that let nobody know about it.
Oh, yeah.
His mom suffered from depression and alcoholism, and the only public photo of his entire time at LSU was her celebrating after he had broke Oscar Robertson's record. Yeah.
We'll bring up her later on because
definitely.
and then we'll bring up this relationship, I think, with him and Press, because this is one of these interesting things where I think everybody thinks that he's on top of the world, and he starts to struggle.
And he's battling in all the genetic inner demons, and it's just really sad. I mean, thank God that he met his wife.
And there's other
time at LSU.
Exactly, because he definitely could have gone down some dark roads. The only thing that sucks about his college career was no NCAA appearances. But like you said, he turned a program that was not even getting close to the NIT into a program that was viable.
Well, yeah, he's a 3-time All-American.
Yeah.
I mean, every year he's playing varsity ball. He's the best of the best, and it's not to shit on the SEC, it is still a football conference, but
Yes.
it's like, oh, we play basketball too.
Yes, definitely. So he gets selected by the Atlanta Hawks, first round, pick number 3. And he
Worst place he could have probably gone, as they say.
doesn't fit in whatsoever.
Yeah, because it's the whole mentality, like all these old pros making, peanuts as far as their professional career, and he comes in and he has all these endorsements. He's already $1 million a year player like his dad had always wanted, and white guy playing in the South, all black team.
Well, this is
not going to mesh.
Yeah, this is interesting because this is one of these points in professional sports where we see the salaries are in such huge difference. So all these guys, all these veterans on the team I don't even think their collective salaries are making what Pete makes, which is what the huge problem is with him coming in, is they're like, why the fuck you paying this rookie? Because he got the first $2 million contract. And I think it was Lou Hudson.
Yeah, Lou Hudson was their established star, and they were a
Walt
playoff
Bellamy.
team. Yeah,
Yes.
Walt Bellamy.
And they, to their credit, were very conservative in their play.
Yeah.
Pete comes in, and we know how flashy he is. This was something else I wanted to say. He was the first, and this was his quote, he was the first ever white player to be offered $1 million contract by the Harlem Globetrotters. So it was like their first real...
Could you imagine him and Wilt in those famous shorts on the Harlem Globetrotters?
Oh my God.
Because he was doing legit Globetrotter shit just in the
mid-game.
NBA.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost a Rafer Austin type of thing as far as ball handling. Like, transcend race, hombre.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that he said when he went to the Hawks was they were like, hey, man, you need to quit that shit. And he was like, hey, you guys need to get on this train that I'm trying to bring you on. And actually Lou had one of his best seasons with him.
Oh, yeah.
Because he took off so much pressure from him.
And this was an era where the ABA was starting and going on where could you imagine him on an ABA team and them just like trumpeting him as basically the Jesus of their league?
Well,
oh my God.
Everybody says like this is where pre-Showtime, nobody was calling it that, but he was like Showtime. It would have been Showtime if he was on an ABA team.
Everybody's watching like that Robin Williams golf quote, oh dear Christ.
Yeah.
But it's a white guy doing it, so you're like, am I sure about this?
Yes, his ball handling skill is so ridiculous above everybody else's because he spends so much more time on it. I feel like
he's locked in a gym, but that's where he wants, and that's what I always found weird. It's not like his dad is like padlocking him in the gym and being like, you're going to stay here for 3 hours. It's like, here, I'm going to drop you off. And then he's just perfecting his game and kicking ass and on his own free will and accord, which I find amazing.
Yes.
Honestly.
No, but like we said again, this Atlanta Hawks team, good team, but just don't mesh.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think they took him more or less because they had recently moved to Atlanta from St. Louis. They needed asses and seats. Probably not the best fit, but even in his rookie year, he makes the all-rookie team and averages 23.2 points a game. And then in his second season, they make the playoffs both years. He's still at 19.3 and is averaging almost 28 against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference playoffs.
Yeah, they said that was really drove the Celtics to a good series on that one, and he really was the focal point of their offense. And I want to say something, and we brought it up before on how he was like one of these first players to change it from a completely large man game. He was the first guard ever to be given a huge contract. Nobody's given fucking guards anything. So
and now it's all a guard and swingman league.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, we see these 3 and 4 guys, but it's not that 5-man.
No, not at all. I mean, you get a guy about 6'9" to play this center position nowadays. Well, you're basically
Wes Unseld.
Yeah, you're getting Wes Unseld and Charles Barkley.
There you go.
In 72-73, though, he makes his first All-Star team.
Yeah, he really excels now.
And Lou Hudson him and Lou Hudson have 2,000-point seasons, which is pretty incredible.
Oh yeah, weren't they the second ever tandem to do that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And actually, first teammates to do it.
Okay, first teammates, yeah.
26.1 points per game, almost 7 assists, making the All-Star team. And then the following season, he's just lighting it up.
Yeah.
And goes to the All-Star game, 27.7 points a game. And unfortunately, he's kind of wore out his welcome in Atlanta because they missed the playoffs.
Well, this is the thing is he gets traded, and Atlanta said they put out feelers and they pretty much got back like, we don't want that hot dog.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want that individual asshole.
Which is so weird because you'd think of hot dogging it as someone who's not white.
Well, no, I would think of him as, because this was the thing that we were saying was he made Lou so much better, and it was a misunderstanding of what he was doing, which was drawing attention and doing this shit that really took defenses out of their normal rhythm. And it really was, like I said, a misunderstanding. But we see this New Orleans Jazz expansion team come up.
And they need asses and seats. They don't care where he comes from.
And they know he has an LSU, a Louisiana following.
Exactly. No. And, people of that era, it's like, oh, you associate it with someone who's not white. But by that same token, it's like, no, you want asses and seats and you want the best scorer in the game.
I thought this was interesting. Atlanta Hawks, they were talking about him. They're like, hey, we traded you to this new Jazz team. And Pete asked what they got for him. And this was right after they had put the feelers out and nobody wanted him.
Yeah.
So like they were expecting to get like nothing in return. And he like listed off all the stuff they got. And Atlanta was ecstatic. They were we got so much more than we ever expected.
It's a king's ransom, and yet the Atlanta Hawks are basically like my love life as far as NBA championships.
Yeah. Well, and
up until now, obviously.
And then Pistol Pete goes, that's all? That's all you got?
Yeah.
And it's such a great thing for him being in his head because he kind of knows, like, I could be essentially a combo guard on a championship team, but he just...
Well, and you... For someone like him to be as talented as he was basically, to think like that, you have to have the most amount of dick swinging confidence in yourself.
Well, this is where I think his mental stability starts to go, is he starts to kind of get into alcohol and he starts to kind of get into himself.
Well, it's New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Let's bring that up. I mean... Trust me, I've been there, and it is a cruel mistress of a city as far as alcohol intake.
So I think he has one season, and this is when his mom, Helene, kills herself.
Yeah, like I said before, his mom and press had written letters to very close confidants and friends about basically keeping her away from LSU games because of her alcoholism and depression and, that type of
wild
stuff is genetic. Mood swings and things like that. He's like, I don't know what to do. And obviously at that time you had no type of counseling or anybody to help with that mental health state. And it just drives Pete kind of down, but he's still performing. I mean, New Orleans proves to be, at least as far as his career success, a godsend to him. Despite the depression.
I was going to say the depression's huge, but I feel like even though New Orleans is the worst team in the NBA, he himself is showing like, hey, I can do what I did at LSU.
Exactly. And, on a crappy team, when he's your best player, I mean, almost 26 points a game in 75-76. And then the following season, 76-77, as I stated before with the Seth Curry comment, he leads the league in scoring at over 31 points a game.
Yes, and this is his season, 76-77. You see, because we see him kind of get hampered by injuries, but you see, like, this is what players are essentially, this is like Kobe Bryant shit.
Yeah, like in this season, I had wrote it down, 40 or more in 13 games, 50 or more in 4, and then he had a 68-point game against the Knicks.
Yep, the Knicks game is what everybody says. You're just like, whoa, who the hell is this guy?
And it's not like the Knicks are the embarrassment that they are now. Like, this is a legitimate New York Knicks team.
No, straight up. This is a legitimate Knicks team. And something I thought was so interesting was the only other players to score more was Kareem and Elgin Baylor,
who are not guards.
Well, who was the coach of the Jazz at the time.
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting. And he probably was out there just like, light it up, my man.
Yeah.
Light it up. Because he could see, he was just like, no, like,
I'm a scorer. I know how this works.
Exactly. I'm a scorer. You just light it up. And again, pre 3-point line.
Yeah, and you wonder what his scoring average would have been pre 3-point line.
Yeah.
Because if you were a coach with any sorts of sense or sensibility, you would just be like, no, 7's getting the ball right now.
No, yeah. It would be so, like we said with Press, where people were like, oh, he's demanding him get 30 shots a game. I bet the team was like, no. We're giving him the ball. We want him to take 30 shots because his shooting is so great.
And he was an unselfish player. It's not like if he was triple covered, he'd still take a shot. And
he was averaging 6 to 7 assists almost his whole career.
Yeah, and he's a 2 guard. He's not the point guard.
Yes.
I mean, if you had asked him to play point guard, he would be fucking John Stockton if he wanted to be.
Exactly. So I want to say 76-77 without a doubt. Best year, 77-78. This is where we see him get the knee problems.
Yeah, and then
he only played 32 games in 77-78.
And at that time, medical technology and medical research was not for what it is. You see guys coming back from ACLs and cartilage shit within a year.
Yeah.
At that time,
career enders.
They're basically career enders because you just don't have the luxuries that we have now.
They essentially were making starters, bench players, and bench players retire.
Exactly.
That's what was happening in that era. And that's what we see from the Jazz. They still kind of try and hold them on. But in 78, 79, he plays like 50 games.
And he's still an all-star because he's still awesome. And then he's in 79-80, after a few games, he's sent to the Celtics.
Well, I thought it was interesting because they drafted Adrian Dentley, and they essentially were like, this is our guy, and they put him on waivers. So
they put him on waivers. Yeah, they didn't even trade him. They just let him go. And Adrian Dantley would be... My dad actually watched him in college at Notre Dame. Yeah.
Oh,
he would be, considering his Bad Boys exit, he would be a fantastic podcast.
All right. Hey, I don't know if you heard it here first, but we're lining that one up. Because that's actually pretty awesome. I like that.
Yeah.
But, so Celtics go out, pick him up off the waivers.
And he's like a bench player, yet he's still averaging almost 12 a game
he's
off the bench.
Yeah, he's 6'7" player, and he comes in, and it's Larry Legend's first year.
Yeah, definitely. God, could you imagine those two playing together with both in their prime?
Oh, my God.
That would have been cheating.
It would have been the best. Like, think about how great the Celtics were at that time.
Oh, my God.
Even if he was semi-healthy and stayed on, and was a bench player, that would have been so amazing, because there was a point in which he came on for the Celtics and scored a shit ton in one of those games.
Like the first year of the 3-point line where he's just like, I get one extra for just being me.
Yep. So the Celtics lose to Julius Erving and the 76ers.
Yeah, Chocolate Thunder, all those guys, Moses Malone.
Yep.
But
that absolutely wonderful 76ers team, but this is something where it is so sad. So I want to start bringing up the sad shit.
Because it is very sad.
He is constantly criticized as this individual player. And throughout his whole career, all he's ever said was, I want one championship so people understand, like, I'm in it for the team. This is a team game.
To be validated.
To be validated. He constantly said he just wants one championship.
He's like the Dan Marino of basketball.
And he was on the Celtics team, and his knees were so bad that he said he just had to retire. He didn't think the Celtics were going to win the next year. And then the Celtics proceeded to win.
Right?
And
I played
pretty
my
much
last
have,
game. Yeah.
Yes, and pretty much have this team that he said he was like, I could have played 2 or 3 more years as a bench player, but I decided not to.
Just ring chase, man.
And it made him suicidal.
Yeah, no, he went through a dark period post-retirement.
This is his super dark period right here.
And let me say, it's weird to think of someone as suicidal who in an NBA career averages over 24 points a game, over 5 assists, makes the Hall of Fame his first year of induction in 1987, and his number 7 is retired by the Jazz, and the Pelicans have retired his number 44.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. But you see why, this is why I'm bringing it up, because most of the time you'd be like, why the hell would that guy ever be depressed? But you see why, because he was criticized for this one thing, and he literally had the opportunity and decided to retire. And he was like, it was so on himself that it was hard for him to get out of his own mind, if that makes sense. And that's why he was so suicidal for like years.
Well, and if you think about it, he has to be in his own mind all the time because since he was a kid, he was set apart from everybody.
Yep.
Like, he was put on this earth to do one thing, and that is play basketball. Not only coupled with that, you have the mom genetic shit. You have the I won't call him overbearing, but the dad who's just like, I'm making the perfect basketball specimen.
Well, he said that it was not a dysfunctional relationship, not a fractured one, but it was a different one with his father because his father had all these expectations and he almost felt like sometimes he was like this trophy or this prize that he would kind of show, like, look what I made, look what I did. And later in life, that's when him and Press really
reconciled
and became really close because Pete ends up finding, I believe he becomes a Christian. I'm not.
Yeah, he went with Buddhism. He started believing in UFOs. Like, he went on an InfoWars route before he was just like, oh yeah, I'm a born again Christian. Jesus. All right.
And neither of us are religious on this show, but it's one of these things where you see the peace that comes from it, which I am so 100% for. And it was one of these, like he said, like it, because he got his father into it and they pretty much had like this relationship he always wanted. And that's the things about religion that I have to be for.
Between that and how it has helped addicts, I'm just like, I back away. I'm like, it's not what I'm about, but if it makes you better, 10-4.
Exactly.
Good
like
for you,
I won't
man.
ever talk shit on it again like I was when I was like 19. Like, I'm a, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. No, I see the positive impact that it has on essentially these people that are lost because he felt like he was lost. His dad died in
1987. And one of the weird, and it's almost eerie, as his dad was dying, he's like, I'll see you soon, Dad.
Yep.
And Pete's only 39.
He's only 39, yeah.
He's only 39 years old.
And that was the other thing, and I feel like we kind of touched on it a little but didn't, was he was one of these guys that had this face that was so recognizable that he was on all these commercials. And this is when the commercials started to come out for athletes.
Well, and as we talked about in that Magic Johnson episode, was like the NBA was not marketable in the 70s.
No.
Nobody wanted it. But you have this Pistol Pete character coming out of nowhere, coming out of Western PA, coming out of LSU. And it's like everybody can rally behind that because he's a star. And
he's also really readily identifiable as almost what the music stars were looking like in that era with the floppy hair, and he almost had like short shorts but floppy socks. So
the floppy socks.
It was very rebellious. Even though when we look back on it, we're like, "What's that dork doing?" But it's in the era. He is very marketable.
Yeah, and good Lord, if he played in the ABA, what that could have been.
That would have been so awesome.
I feel like if he played in the ABA, like if he wanted to go there, that would have forced a merger.
Yeah.
Honestly.
No, that would have, yes.
Like that would have forced a merger off the bat because everyone would have been like, okay, well, this league's legit.
Yeah, legit. And then he would have been draining threes off the bat. That's my other thing.
With that red, white, and blue ball, just sinking them.
That red, white, and blue ball. I love how when they first introduced it, they're like, this ball isn't correct. It's like slipping out of everybody's hands.
Right? This makes no sense.
So, and this is something that I feel like he was born on a basketball court. And then in 1988, he goes and plays a pickup game with a doctor and another friend. And this guy's having a conversation with him. And they're just talking about, Pete's like, oh, this basketball pickup game was great. I got to do this more often. And the guy says, how you feeling? And he says, I'm feeling great.
Yep.
He goes to turn and walk away, and out of the corner of his eye, he just sees Pete just like face plant and has a heart attack. And he had a heart defect from birth that they never knew about.
And they said he only should have lived until his like early mid-20s.
Yeah.
I guess his left ventricle basically wasn't there. He was born without it. So the right ventricle was just basically pumping all the blood. And by age of 40, January 5th, 1988, it had had enough.
Yep.
And it took him away.
Took away one of the greatest basketball players, but like we said, had one of these, I wouldn't even say sad careers, but was tarnished by people talking shit on him not getting this championship or not being a team player. But for us,
but he was always a team player.
for
when
us,
you watch
yes.
film, yeah, he was always a team player. It's just like he's your best player, so he should be taking all the shots.
That's what really sucks about him not living for, I feel like, people recognizing what he contributed to the game.
He's like almost a Paul Bunyan of the NBA. It's like the things that you hear about, like the things that you see, you're just like, is a human doing that?
Yeah.
Is this real? Like you watch him and you're like, if he played now, the star he could have been and the style of play now is almost all related to him. And I find that fascinating.
Yep. Hey, everybody. This is just a stock message at the end of every episode. We hope you enjoyed whatever athlete and or team that episode was about. Just want to say, give us a quick follow on all social media. We have a YouTube channel, the Sports Experience Podcast, and we're on Instagram, DiTolla Dominic, and myself, Quinn Comedy. So give us a follow all around. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.